Once I got the Rodecaster turned on and everything plugged in, I was amazed by the clarity of the sound I was hearing in my headphones. Hi there, and welcome to the Tech Eyehound. I'm your host, Don Bullock. I call this channel the Tech Eyehound because I sniff out news and other information from Apple and other related technologies that I use here in my studio. I just recently switched over to this Rodecaster Duo, and this is my initial reaction to switching over to this from my Vocaster. With one video published on YouTube, I've successfully switched out my Vocaster for the Rodecaster Duo. Wow, what a difference. Where the Vocaster was simply a plug-and-play device, it's taken a while to get the Rodecaster up and running, and I'm still having a few issues with it. The Duo is much more complex and more versatile too. There's a much bigger learning curve with the Rodecaster compared to the Vocaster. My first problem was Rode's infamous on-off switch. I quickly discovered how difficult it is to use and see why many have complained about it. While I know why Rode designed it that way, they designed it so that they would prevent users from accidentally turning it off. That's nice, but I even had problems turning it on. And as designed, I had problems turning it off too. I'll have more to say about this switch in a more comprehensive review. It's a problem I'll have to get used to. Once I got the Rodecaster turned on and everything plugged in, I was amazed by the clarity of the sound I was hearing in my headphones when I spoke into this microphone. That was really encouraging. I was amazed at the difference in clarity of what I was hearing compared to what I heard in the Vocaster. I immediately thought I'd made a good decision to switch. That thought was quickly dashed. After recording a short audio test sample in Final Cut Pro using the Rodecaster, I ran into problems hearing the playback of the recording. Nothing was coming through my headphones. There was nothing there. Not only was nothing coming through the headphones, it wasn't being registered on any of the meters on the Rodecaster. Finally, after checking all my connections, unplugging and plugging in everything, and I mean everything, switching USB ports on the back of my computer and anything else I could think of, I just gave up and took a break from it. After watching several videos on YouTube about the Rodecasters that evening, none of which gave me a solution to my problem, I went to bed that evening very discouraged about my purchase. I almost decided to just hook up the Vocaster and forget it for a while. The next morning, after watching a few still unhelpful videos on YouTube, I headed back here to my desk and the Rodecaster. My first move when I got back here was to start playing my sample voice track on the computer while wearing my headphones. As I played it, perhaps for the fifth time, maybe even more, and getting more frustrated and discouraged with every try, I just sort of flailed my hands in dismay, and I sort of accidentally tapped on the first virtual channel slider. I looked down at the Rodecaster and suddenly saw the USB symbol with a 1 and realized it was my feed from the computer. I also saw the headphone ear symbol and mute symbol on the lower end of the virtual slider and noticed the volume was turned down. What a dummy. I immediately hit the ear symbol and turned the volume up using the knob for the screen controls. Suddenly, I heard something in my headphones. It was my recording coming through from the computer. It was coming through my headphones with great clarity. I was finally in business. Well, at least I could hear the recording on the computer. There was still more to learn. After I finally got the Rodecaster working the way it should, I was able to start playing with it. I quickly discovered how amazing this thing is. The flexibility of what it can do and how well it can do it is just amazing to me. I literally spent hours experimenting with the configurations and adjustments, but barely scratched the surface of all the possibilities. One of the absolute first things I did is change how the meters look. The default They have like a grid pattern with lines for volume, but there's no numbers or indicators of any kind. And I switched over to what they call the broadcast mode, which has numbers and indicator lines, which is great. I'm really enjoying that. As I fiddled with the Rodecaster, one of the first things I did was to look at the microphone presets. That's one reason I bought it. I have this Rode Procaster microphone, so I wanted to see what the Rodecaster presets do to improve the sound. I like the results and I plan to make further adjustments over time. Once I selected the Procaster preset, I noticed that there was even 3 choices for that: neutral, podcast studio, and broadcast. This thing has a lot of different choices. Thanks to the Aphex microphone enhancement features that it has built into it, it looks tempting. Maybe I need Arl Exciter, or perhaps maybe that big bottom. Yes, I already know I have one of those. Perhaps at first I may just try to adjust the sound using the VoxLab default processing editor. I have to play around and see how much depth, sparkle, and punch my voice needs. I realize that the Vocaster has some voice enhancement features, but as I pointed out in my review, I didn't like the presets and it was difficult with just the volume slider to remember where I started when I used the software. And the equalizer adjustments were even harder to keep track of, and there was no way to listen to the before and after sound of the enhancements. The Rodecaster allows for that type of testing by simply switching the voice enhancement off and on, and it's easy to return to the previous setting. So it's a lot easier. For now, I'll just have to stick with the presets for the Procaster mic because I have a lot of content to make, and all that experimenting with additional mic processing will take time, so it'll just have to wait. One thing I did change is to move the audio output from my computer from the virtual slider to the third physical slider. I thought this would help me keep the volume where I wanted it and allow me to quickly make adjustments when necessary. That move has helped a lot. Making these kinds of changes is very simple. I'll cover that one in more detail when I do a full review of the Rodecaster later. Making that switch with the volume slider suddenly dawned on me that the input sound of my headphones from my computer was on a totally different channel from the volume of my recording when I record into the microphone. That's controlled by a knob. I could now set both of them and not have to keep changing my headphone volumes like I did on the Vocaster. This is going to solve a lot of those problems, and probably my biggest problems. As I got further into making all the different adjustments, I also realized that the Rodecaster solved another Vocaster issue. It allowed me to more easily set gain for my microphone using an actual meter that both had a target to aim for and markers that weren't available on the Vocaster's center dial with its LEDs. There's no guessing on the Duo like there was on the Vocaster. I can just leave that volume set and not mess with it. That's amazing for me. In addition to playing with all the adjustments, I was also successful in getting my original Rode Wireless Go microphone system to work with the Duo. No, I'm not talking about the Go 2 or the 3 or the Me or the Pro. This is the original Wireless Go. While it won't connect wirelessly as suggested by someone at Rode, I bought the Rode dongle that converts an XLR plug into a 3.5 millimeter TRS plug. I hooked up the original Rode Wireless Go receiver using a cable that I used with my Canon camera, and I'll explain all that later in an upcoming video, but it works great. As I created my first video using the Rodecaster, I was thrilled at the ability to record all my audio into the micro SD card on the Rodecaster. It also solved some issues I was having with inconsistent sound with the Vocaster. To keep all my recordings as consistent as possible, I recorded all my voice clips on the Rodecaster's micro SD card, and I was happy with the results. I'd also like to add that the Rodecaster Duo, as you can see over here, does fit on the low-profile arm setup that I made for the Vocaster. I simply attached a new VESA mount to the bottom of the Duo using the threaded holes that Rode provided for the purpose, disconnected all the wires from the Vocaster, unclipped it from the mount on the arm, clipped on the Rodecaster, and connected all the wires to it. I'll add here that the Rodecaster does need a separate power wire, whereas the Vocaster gets power from the USB connection. While the Rodecaster Duo is quite a bit heavier than the Vocaster, it's holding up fairly well on the low-profile arm. I do, however, need to tighten it more often than I did with the Vocaster because of that extra weight, and sometimes it tries to tilt a little bit. I still have to figure out routing and securing all the wires. That'll come in time. Some may wonder why I went with the Rodecaster. It has a lot to do with their customer support. While companies like Focusrite do upgrade their firmware and supporting software, Rode has shown over time that they are committed to listening to their users and making updates often to meet the needs where possible. The main reason Rode came out with the Rodecaster Pro 2 was that they could no longer upgrade the original. It just ran out of computing power. As they have already demonstrated their continued support for the Rodecaster Pro and Duo by making some major firmware upgrades that they are committed to their customers. They built in more computing capacity for these upgrades into these new Rodecasters just for that purpose. One thing that amazes me is the same electronics that are in the Rodecaster Pro 2 are also in this Duo. Only difference between the two is the number of microphone inputs and outputs. 2 for the Duo and 4 for the Pro 2. But then on the Duo, they added a microphone headphone jack to the front that's absent on the Pro 2, and it's very handy for my situation. So far, the Rodecaster Duo has solved many of the frustrations I had with the Vocaster. I'll just have to wait and see if it adds some new frustrations in addition to that on and off button that I'm not aware of yet. I haven't even begun to explore the different features of this interface. The big question, of course, does the Rodecaster Duo improve the sound quality for my videos and podcasts? I'll publish a review that hopefully answers that question and more once I've been using the Duo for a while. And some of you might even tell me before then in the comments. Just remember, I'm still learning the Rodecaster. And you may have noticed I'm a little hoarse this week. So far, I'm very happy with the switch, but must reiterate what I said about the Vocaster. It served me well. For its price, the Vocaster is a good audio interface for beginners on a budget, especially if they're still selling around $100. It's very easy to use. The only reason I decided to make the switch now was that I was able to get a very limited time rare offer of $100 off the white Rodecaster Duo on Amazon. It was just an offer I couldn't refuse. Are the Rodecasters the best audio interfaces out there? I have no idea. I'm not someone who gets free things from companies to review. What I have here in my studio are things that I spent my own money on, and my budget is very limited. All I can share is my experience with the things that I use. Once I knew there was something better than a Vocaster I could afford from a company that listens to their customers, I went for it. Yes, I also admit that I like gear when I can afford it. And yes, I know too that I need to upgrade my camera, but in due time. I just can't afford that yet. My video reviewing the Vocaster can be found over here. Below it is a video on attaching the Vocaster to the low-profile arm. Please subscribe for the future Rodecaster Duo comprehensive review and more by clicking on my photo below. I appreciate you all sticking around this long, and thank you all very much for watching.